Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking an absolutely unbelievable true story. I'm talking about a forgotten hero whose sheer grit and tactical brilliance literally rivaled the greatest warriors in history. And yet, her name is somehow missing from most history books. We're diving into the life of Teresa Magbanua, the unsurrendered general of the Visayas. So get ready, because this is a story of defiance, leadership, and just absolute courage that you definitely need to hear.
3. Now, that might seem like a small number, right? But 3 represents the astonishing number of foreign empires our subject fought against during her single lifetime. Think about that. She didn't just stand up to one occupying force. She resisted the Spanish colonizers, fought the American occupation, and then decades later defied the Japanese Empire during World War II. That is an incredibly rare and honestly staggering military resume.
So, let's dive right into this mystery. Who was the only woman to command troops in the Visayas during the Philippine Revolution? You know, for decades, she's been a pretty obscure figure to the broader public, often totally overshadowed by politicians and generals from Luzon. But to the troops she actually led and the people of Panay, she was an absolute legend. They called her the Visayan Joan of Arc. But to really understand how a woman in the 1890s ended up commanding men in battle, well, we have to go back to the beginning.
The rebel schoolteacher. Born into a prominent family in Pototan, Iloilo, 19th century expectations for a young woman of her status were, well, strict. She was supposed to learn to sew, do indoor chores, and basically become a quiet, refined lady. But Teresa? Her reality was entirely different. She was out there climbing trees, swimming across rivers, racing horses, wrestling with the boys, and even joining her brothers in mock battles. Her parents actually sent her away to prestigious schools in Manila to be refined, but that education didn't tame her at all. Honestly, it just made her sharper, stronger, and way more independent.
Eventually, she returned to Panay with a teaching degree and became a highly respected schoolteacher. Her students admired her strict discipline, and parents totally respected her sharp intelligence. She ended up marrying Alejandro Balderas, a wealthy landowner, and left the classroom to help manage their expansive farms. By all accounts, her life appeared completely settled. But then, in 1896, the Philippine Revolution erupted, and it completely changed the course of her life and Philippine history forever.
Part 2. Taking command. Now, when the revolution finally reached Panay, she faced pushback at literally every single turn. Her husband strongly objected, basically saying the battlefield was no place for a woman. Even her uncle, General Perfecto Poblador, flat out refused her request to fight. So what did Teresa do? She stubbornly proved them wrong. She showed off her superior horseback riding and then proceeded to completely outshoot his enlisted men in marksmanship. Left with absolutely no choice but to recognize her incredible skill, her uncle finally caved and gave her command of a Bala battalion.
And her military career wasn't just some brief stint either. It was this dramatic, escalating arc over a few short, highly chaotic years. In 1898, she's fighting the Spanish. By 1899, the enemy shifts to the Americans. Then comes this tragic internal betrayal between 1899 and 1900, right up until she's forced to disband in 1901. Let's actually zoom in on that very first explosive year.
Her first major engagement was the Battle of Barrio Yating. The Spanish soldiers were definitely expecting an easy victory, but instead, out of the smoke comes Teresa Magbanua. And she didn't lead from the rear, no way. Mounted on horseback, wielding a pistol in one hand and a bolo in the other, she personally led a cavalry charge. The sheer audacity and ferocity of that attack completely routed the Spanish line. In that single, chaotic, totally triumphant battle, she earned the absolute, unbreakable loyalty of her troops. They lovingly gave her the title Nay Isa, which means Mother Isa.
And she proved it wasn't just beginner's luck either at the Battle of Sapong Hills. Here, she faced Spanish troops who had superior weapons, way better training, and stronger positions. But Teresa was a brilliant tactician. She utilized the elevated terrain and the dense vegetation to completely overcome those massive tactical disadvantages. Through surprise attacks and her deep knowledge of the landscape, she secured a huge victory, earning high praise from male generals and playing a crucial role in the liberation of Iloilo City.
Part 3. The American War and Internal Betrayal.
Following the Treaty of Paris, Spain ceded the Philippines to the United States, but Teresa flat out refused to lay down her arms. In March of 1899, she fought in the Battle of Balantong alongside General Martin Delgado. Now, this was one of the bloodiest encounters in the Visayas. The whole nature of the warfare changed entirely here. Facing vastly superior American artillery and logistics, she was forced to retreat into the rugged interior of Panay, transitioning her forces into this brutal, grueling guerrilla war of attrition.
But here's the thing. The greatest tragedies she faced in this war
didn't actually come from foreign enemies. They came from within. The exact same internal Filipino factionalism that plagued the forces in Luzon eventually reached Panay. In 1899, her brother, General Pascual Magbanua, was murdered by rival Filipino officers. And just a year later, in 1900, her youngest brother, Major Elias Magbanua, was shot in the back by a Filipino assassin. It is just absolutely heartbreaking to consider that while she was out there fighting an occupying force in the jungle, she lost her beloved brothers to internal political betrayal.
By 1901, her forces were completely depleted of food and ammunition, so she disbanded her men and ordered them to return to their families. But, and here is the absolutely crucial takeaway, even in total defeat, she never surrendered. She flatly refused to sign the mandatory oath of allegiance to the United States. Her army was gone, sure, but her unsurrendered spirit remained totally intact.
Part 4. The Visayan Joan of Arc.
Now that title, the Visayan Joan of Arc, it wasn't just handed to her because she happened to be a woman in a war. The shared traits are honestly undeniable. Both of them rode fearlessly into battle on horseback. Both inspired male soldiers to follow them into seemingly impossible fights, completely defying the gender expectations of their respective eras. But, while Joan of Arc led armies in her youth and became a French national symbol, Teresa led in adulthood, becoming the ultimate symbol of Visayan courage.
So, it begs the question, with such an incredible resume, why isn't she on the front page of every history textbook? Well, historical accounts heavily focused on the revolutionary leaders in Luzon, and a lot of crucial records from Panay were tragically lost during the wars. On top of that, women's military achievements were just historically ignored, as national narratives favored a much smaller, consolidated group of heroes. Basically, she just slipped through the cracks of mainstream history.
Part 5. The Final Resistance. Let's fast forward a bit to World War II, between 1941 and 1945. Teresa Magbanua is now an elderly widow. She's obviously no longer fighting on the front lines, but her patriotism hasn't faded one bit. She actually begins selling off her personal properties and belongings to secretly finance the local guerrilla resistance fighting against the occupying Japanese forces. It's just an awe-inspiring final act of defiance. She literally never stopped fighting for her country's freedom, continuing her service right up until she passed away quietly in 1947 at the age of 78.
Fortunately, historians are finally working to restore her legacy today. October 13th is now officially observed as Teresa Magbanua Day in her hometown of Pototan. Streets in Iloilo and prestigious regional awards proudly bear her name. And most fittingly, in 2022, a vessel named the BRP Teresa Magbanua was commissioned, which ensures that her legacy continues to actively sail and protect Philippine waters today.
There's a quote that beautifully summarizes the core takeaway from her incredible journey fighting 3 different foreign powers. Courage is not defined by gender, title, or fame, but by the willingness to stand for one's country when freedom is at risk. It hits the nail right on the head. Teresa Magbanua didn't wait around for permission to be brave, and she certainly didn't need a formal title to lead.
All of this leaves us with one final question. What truly defines a hero in the pages of history? Is it the fame they achieve, the statues built in their honor, or is it that unsurrendered spirit they carried when no one else was watching? Teresa Magbanua's story really challenges us to rethink the narratives we've been taught and to actively seek out those extraordinary figures that history almost forgot. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning history.